What's up, Fox? Sam Fox here, and today we are talking about the Xbox One X in 2022. Now, the Xbox One X released in 2017, and although I wasn't an early adopter, I believe I got it when it was on sale for $100 less, probably less than a year after it came out, and I absolutely loved it. Although I was 99% switched over to PC, a lot of my friends had Xboxes, and that's what ended up being played on because there wasn't a whole lot of cross-compatibility back in the day. So now that crossplay is the thing, I don't really use the Xbox One X, but I brought it just in case people wanted to play split screen games, which is what consoles still excel at. With that said, though, let's talk about the performance in 2022, because back in the day, I remember loving this thing. I remember playing Halo 5 on it with the Xbox One X enhancements in 4K. It was really something to look at. Gears of War 4, I'll never forget, I looked at my dad and I was like, this is the best video games they're gonna get. And yet somehow Gears 5, even on the Xbox One X, managed to set those expectations even higher. So really the Xbox One X was a fantastic machine. I want to see if it still is a fantastic machine. And I'm going to be running some of the most recent titles on it to really give it a run for its money and see what happens. Coming up first is MLB 22, and although I'm not the biggest fan of baseball, this game automatically gets so many points just for having 3 different slider options. There's 1080p, 1440p, and 4K. I forget what they're actually called in game, but they specifically state this one's 1080p, this one's 1440p, and this one's 2160p, which is fantastic. I don't know why other games don't do that. And they give multiple options, and I want to talk about those options. So starting off with 1080p is obviously going to give the most performance, but with that said, it was still a little bit to be desired. The performance was great at 1080p. It ran at 60 FPS most of the time, unless you were skipping through cutscenes really fast. But anti-aliasing is not a MLB 22 strong suit. So at 1080p, it really does look quite a bit noticeable, and the entire image itself looks quite smooth, but bumping it up to 1440p really fixed a lot of those problems, and the game still ran very consistently. It had a variable frame rate, and there were some parts that ran at 30, which was obvious, specifically moments that had a lot of audience members in the background, but actual gameplay itself still stuck close to or at 60 FPS a lot of the time, and this is what I'd recommend, because switching things up to 4K introduced a whole lot of frame issues when it came to switching between cutscenes and certain things along that. Although it didn't affect gameplay, gameplay was also stuck to 30 FPS, which is not my preferred way to play, especially because MLB 22 requires a lot of reaction times when you aren't playing on baby mode settings like I am, because otherwise the Colorado Rockies would never beat the Dodgers a day in their life, but you know, that's neither here nor there. And because there's no anti-aliasing, 4K didn't make the visuals look that much better than 1440p. You still get some anti-aliasing issues even at 4K, and I think that 1440p is sharp enough to hit a fantastic middle ground between the 1080p and 4K modes. So I definitely recommend playing this game at 1440p, even if you have a 4K monitor. Up next is another heavy-hitting game that I can only run it low on my RTX 2070 Super, Halo Infinite. Now, there are 2 options. The first one is Performance Mode, which runs at a variable 1080p, but keeps 60 FPS consistently. And as you can see, the graphics aren't fantastic. They're a lot closer to Halo 5 than Halo Infinite should be, but this is still the preferred way I'd play because it does run very smoothly, and really, who plays Halo for graphics? Even when the whole controversy came out about Halo looking bad, I didn't care whatsoever, because as long as it runs good and has split screen, that's what a Halo game is all about. And Halo Infinite very nearly didn't have that in multiplayer and still doesn't have it in campaign, which is why I will not spend money on it. And then comes quality, and quality does look much better. I will give it that. The visuals are fantastic, and perhaps if you're willing to sit through 30 FPS, then playing the campaign on quality might be the way to go. With that said, I was playing multiplayer, just quick play, and it was hard. A flick shooter like Halo Infinite running at 30 FPS makes the upgraded visuals, which again, like I said, are really nice. The visuals are much clearly sharper and closer to 4K. It still runs variably, and I think that detail has also been cranked up a bit, but the performance cost of getting half the FPS is just awful. I cannot play at 30 FPS, but I don't know what to say. Maybe you can. Up next is RE Village. Despite being a little bit of an older game, it still absolutely is way past the Xbox One X's prime. And I realize that there are constraints of the Xbox One X, and it really shined through during this game in specific, even more so than I'd say Halo Infinite and especially MLB 22, because it was the first game that made me question choosing performance mode or choosing the visuals mode. So let's talk about the quality mode first, because in the actual scenario in the mansion, which I will be showing as well, it actually ran great. It ran at almost completely 60 FPS. And I was like, wow, if the actual game runs like this most of the time, then there's not even a point to having a performance mode. Because if you can get a variable close to 60 FPS with visuals looking this good and as sharp as they are, then what's the point, right? Then I thought of something because this is the demo, and there are two demos, one of which is in the village. So I decided something gotta be weird in here. So I decided to play it on the village demo, and the moment I did, I realized the problem with performance, because it is a variable frame rate, which is nice. Having an uncapped frame rate is good, because then there are moments that will run smoother than others, but that village demo really struggled, and it ran at 30 FPS most of the time. It still looked good, but unfortunately, having it be 30 FPS is just a pain in my backside, but I really can't expect too much out of this 5-year-old console, and it still looked beautiful. But when I switched it to performance mode, it looked pretty bad, but it ran at a solid 60 FPS, which is much easier for shooting zombies and such. And it's just hard because it didn't look good whatsoever. Probably even lower than what low is like on the PC to hit that 60 FPS target. And I don't mind the change of resolution. I didn't think that that was a gigantic deal in the game, but really the decrease in texture quality is what got me to think on this choice of, do I go for higher visuals and lower FPS, or bad visuals and 60 FPS. So that was the first game that really showed me that the Xbox One X is struggling in 2022.
To see him.
Oh boy, and I'm gonna get into a rant in the next few ones, because at least Resident Evil had an option to choose between performance or visuals. Life is Strange True Colors next did not have that option. Now, I'm not gonna rant on this one too much, because Life is Strange is very much a visual novel. 30 FPS isn't a big deal. You aren't relying on fast reflexes in that game or anything. And if you treat it like a movie, I ended up getting lost in it and playing it longer than the benchmark. But with that said, the visuals were bad enough that I feel like a decrease in resolution would probably make it run at 60, because I don't know what it is. I know that Life is Strange is a very stylized game, and I love Life is Strange. It's one of my top games of all time, the first one. But this game, for being 4K 30 FPS, I feel like there could have at least been a performance mode option, even if it didn't matter too much. Just having maybe an uncapped frame rate, or just worse visuals, but still playing the game at 60 FPS, because Life is Strange really has a specific atmosphere about it that wouldn't change much if you lowered the settings beyond what they were at the 4K 30 mode. Now Back 4 Blood. I am getting my fist up. I'm gonna cause some blood, because this was a disappointment. Back 4 Blood is a very visually unimpressive game in terms of zombie games in 2022. Like, I know this game I think came out in 2021. No, I think it came out, I don't even know. But it came out pretty recently, and Left 4 Dead has always been not a front runner in terms of graphics, and that's totally fine. If you can get something to run on a wide range of hardware, whether it be on very low or ultra, that's what matters. The problem is, on the Xbox One X, this game has one option, and that's 30 FPS with sharper visuals. You cannot have a game this intensely flick shooting based without an option for 60 FPS, and that really did make me angry, because 30 FPS was incredibly noticeable in this game. I give Life is Strange a pass because it's a visual novel, but Back 4 Blood being a first-person shooter that's very fast-paced, 30 FPS made it really hard to play, and I was not a fan. And because, like I said, the visuals aren't something that's like godly, then it shouldn't have been an issue to just allow it to happen. And last but not least on our list is Guardians of the Galaxy, another one made by Square Enix, which is kind of weird. I didn't even think about that. It only had one mode. Thank you very much, Square Enix, for that. And again, Guardians of the Galaxy is a shooter title. 30 FPS is fine for people who care more about visuals. But why not have a performance mode? I get that Guardians of the Galaxy looks really good, but why not have it run at lower settings at a lower resolution and allow 60 FPS gameplay for those of us who want it? In the past, I wouldn't have minded as much, but these days, I really am a person who prefers 60 FPS and lower visuals than anything else. That is my sweet spot, and that is what is necessary to get me back onto consoles. And it's really disappointing that a lot of these titles, especially the new ones like Back 4 Blood or Guardians of the Galaxy, that also have an Xbox Series S and X port, don't have these frame rate options. And it reminds me of, let's say, 2018, 2019 Xbox One X, when a lot of games started to ditch the performance modes altogether and just stick to one mode. I don't get it. We already have changeable options on PC, and now that a lot of these games are on the Xbox Series S and X that just already have those options embedded in them, even if you can't quite get 60 FPS, have options like MLB, where perhaps, okay, Guardians of the Galaxy won't be able to run at 60 FPS at 1080p, but we'll give you an uncapped frame rate instead. We'll put it on low settings and it'll run better. And if you want extremely performance bound settings, then we'll go down to 720p with the lowest possible settings, and I'd be happy with that. I play on the Nintendo Switch. But like I said, I don't know if that's the problem with certain game developers, or just because the CPU is such a limiting factor in this that lowering resolutions wouldn't help, like I said at the beginning of the video. So perhaps it's not their fault, but nonetheless, I would have liked the Xbox One X to have done a little bit better in some games. But overall, I still think if you have an Xbox One X, I would not trade it in for a Series S, except for the fact that the Series S has a lot more games that have the option between performance and resolution. Everything else, I think the Xbox One X does fine. And in games like Call of Duty Vanguard, you're just going to get a 60 FPS thing out of the box, and that's totally fine. So that's going to do it for this video. I think that the Xbox One X is still something that's worth having. I don't know if you should go out your way and buy one, unless, like, the chip shortage obviously won't give people the same options anymore. So maybe a used Xbox One X if you're really struggling. If you can get one for like $200, I still think it's a pretty decent purchase. A lot of games are still coming out on it. I don't think there's been a Series S or X exclusive yet, just because of the chip shortage being so constrained. That said, I don't know how long it's going to last that it's going to be like that. But either way, I think if you're looking to play through Xbox One titles and you have maybe an Xbox One S or an Xbox One and you're thinking of upgrading, do it. If you're thinking of getting a Series S but it's been out of stock for months, then maybe get the Xbox One X to tide you over. Or if you have one, don't stress about upgrading unless you can find a Series X. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, like, subscribe, do what you usually do, and as always, buy yourself something nice. What's up, Fox10Fox here, and welcome back to YaTech. Now, for the inaugural episode of YaTech's Resurgence, I wanted to look at one of the most popular graphics cards of all time, one that is always talked about whenever talking about budget hardware, the legendary GTX 750 Ti. Now, there is no driver